Chapter 3. Order in the Zodiac. If the heavens are to be considered as a medium rather than a backdrop, then the next question is unavoidable. Where, within that vast field, does the structure concentrate? The night sky is immense. It overwhelms before it instructs. To the untutored eye, it appears as a glittering excess, beautiful but ungoverned, a scattering of lights without hierarchy or grammar. If meaning exists there, it cannot depend upon every star being read at once. A medium requires selection. A text requires order. A declaration requires not merely sound, but articulation. This is where the zodiac becomes significant. The very word has been so heavily burdened by astrology, horoscopes, personality types, and New Age commerce that the serious mind almost recoils from it on instinct. That reaction is understandable, but it can also be intellectually lazy. A thing may be corrupted without being invented by its corruption. Indeed, corruption almost always feeds on a prior form. It does not create meaning out of nothing. It seizes meaning, bends it, cheapens it, and redirects it toward inferior ends. This distinction must be held firmly from the beginning. To examine the zodiac is not to endorse astrology. It is not to suggest that the stars govern personality, determine fate, or whisper private instructions to the restless modern soul. It is to ask whether the ordered sequence of signs along the sun's apparent path may have once carried a symbolic meaning very different from what later superstition made of it. The zodiac, considered plainly, is a circuit. It is a band of the sky through which the sun appears to move over the course of the year. Within that circuit appear 12 principal signs, each distinct in image and tradition, each occupying its place in a fixed progression. This is already more structured than most people realize. We are not dealing with an arbitrary handful of symbols thrown into the sky and later arranged for amusement. We are dealing with sequence, recurrence, and procession. Sequence matters because meaning often emerges through order. A crown, a serpent, a lamb, a woman, a lion, a cup, and a pair of scales may each have symbolic force on their own, but their fuller meaning depends on arrangement. Place the serpent before the woman, and one sort of narrative begins to suggest itself. Place the lamb before the outpouring of water, and another relationship emerges. Place the lion at the end of the circuit, and the image becomes not merely zoological, but regal, climactic, final. This is why the zodiac must not be approached as a heap of detached emblems. That is precisely how modern astrology has trained people to see it. It isolates the signs, individualizes them, and then converts them into psychological branding. One man is told he is a Scorpio, another that he is a Leo, another that his troubles arise from Mercury or Mars or some vague celestial misalignment. The whole system is reduced to the self. The stars become mirrors for temperament, excuses for behavior, or ornamental badges for the personality. But a sequence is not a personality quiz. A sequence has direction. It begins somewhere, moves somewhere, and completes something. If the zodiac is to be examined seriously, it must be read not as 12 separate fragments, but as a cycle with internal progression. The difference is decisive. Astrology asks, which sign belongs to me? A symbolic reading asks, what story do the signs tell together? The first collapses the heavens into the ego, the second lifts the mind from the ego into pattern. This work is concerned with the second question. The first task, therefore, is to recognize that the zodiac possesses a narrative potential simply by virtue of its ordered form. It is not necessary at this stage to prove that every detail has been preserved without alteration, nor to claim that every later tradition surrounding the signs is pure. Quite the opposite. If the thesis of corruption is correct, then one should expect layers of confusion, exaggeration, and misdirection to accumulate around the original structure. The task is not to treat every inherited association as sacred, but to look for the underlying grammar beneath the debris. This is how corrupted systems must be examined. One does not begin by trusting every later use of the thing. One begins by asking whether there is a prior coherence that explains why the corruption was attractive in the first place. A counterfeit coin is not evidence that money does not exist. It is evidence that money is worth imitating. So too, the existence of astrological corruption does not prove that the zodiac was meaningless at its root. It may prove the opposite. Meaningful systems are the very ones most likely to be stolen. The biblical mind should not find this principle strange. The serpent does not create, he twists. False worship does not arise by inventing reverence from nothing. It redirects reverence toward the wrong object. Idols are not powerful because wood and stone are powerful. They are powerful because man was made to worship, and that true impulse can be degraded into a false one. Corruption is parasitic. It lives by borrowing the bones of something older and better. This, then, is the central suspicion, that what is now called the Zodiac may preserve, beneath its pagan and New Age accretions, the remains of a much older symbolic proclamation. The question is whether the order supports that suspicion. Consider the broad movement. Without yet entering the full exposition of each sign, the sequence traditionally begins with the image of the woman, Virgo, and ends with the lion, Leo. Already there is a dramatic frame: birth and kingship, promise and dominion, hidden seed and visible rule. If this were all, it would be interesting but insufficient. Yet between these two poles, the symbols do not collapse into incoherence. They proceed through themes of judgment, conflict, sacrifice, outpouring, multiplication, restoration, strength, union, gathering, and final triumph. One may object that such meanings are being imposed. This objection must be taken seriously because the human mind is capable of forcing patterns into almost anything. Yet the objection cannot be allowed to function as a lazy dismissal. The real question is not whether interpretation is involved. Interpretation is always involved. The question is whether the interpretation is disciplined by the sequence itself. A man who looks at random cracks in a wall and declares that they narrate the history of redemption is not reading, he is projecting. But a man who encounters a structured set of recurring symbols in a fixed order, with ancient associations and a remarkable thematic progression, is doing something else. He may still be mistaken, but he is not merely inventing from nothing. He is responding to form. The Zodiac has form. That is the point from which serious examination must begin. It is also important to note that the circular nature of the Zodiac does not weaken its narrative character. Modern readers often associate narrative with a straight line, beginning, middle, end. Ancient systems frequently thought in cycles, not because they denied development, but because they saw recurrence woven into creation. Day follows night, spring follows winter, harvest follows seed time, generation follows generation. The circle was not meaningless repetition, it was ordered return. A circle may still tell a story. The year itself does. It moves from darkness toward light, from barrenness toward fruitfulness, from harvest toward death, from death toward renewal. No one accuses the seasons of lacking order because they repeat. Their repetition is part of their instruction. They teach by returning. If the Zodiac is bound to the yearly circuit, then its cyclicality is not a defect, but a feature. The story is not told once and discarded, it is rehearsed continually. The heavens do not merely declare, they declare daily, seasonally, generationally. Their proclamation is not exhausted by a single reading. It returns above every civilization, whether men attend to it or not. This gives the Zodiac, if rightly understood, a catechetical quality. It does not lecture in abstractions. It presents images. It does not argue proposition by proposition. It arranges symbols in visible sequence. In this sense, it is closer to the great stained glass window than a modern textbook. The illiterate can see it, the child can remember it, the wise can contemplate it, the corrupt can misuse it. The New Age mind, however, reverses the direction of interpretation. Instead of asking what the heavens declare about God, judgment, sacrifice, redemption, and kingship, it asks what the heavens say about the self. This is not merely an error in conclusion, it is an error in orientation. The original gaze, if the thesis of this work is correct, was upward and outward. The corrupted gaze bends the entire sky back toward appetite, anxiety, romance, fortune, and self-definition. The heavens are reduced from proclamation to horoscope. That reduction is vulgar. It takes a grand public sign and turns it into a private fortune. It takes the possibility of cosmic testimony and repackages it as spiritual consumerism. It asks the stars not to declare the glory of God, but to flatter the nervous individual. One could scarcely imagine a more perfect corruption, not a denial that the heavens mean something, but a degradation of what they mean. The irony is severe. The materialist looks at the Zodiac and sees foolishness. The astrologer looks at it and sees fate. The Christian, too often, sees only danger and refuses to look at all. But if the heavens declare, then the proper response is not fear of the sky, nor worship of the sky, nor reduction of the sky to chemistry and distance. The proper response is disciplined reading under the authority of the God who made it. This is why order matters. If the zodiac were merely a collection of striking images, it would be dismissed more easily as cultural residue. But if those images form a coherent progression, the dismissal becomes harder. A woman with promised seed, scales of judgment, a scorpion of conflict, an archer of victory, a goatfish of sacrificial paradox, a water bearer of outpouring, fishes of multiplied people, a ram or a lamb of restoration, a bull of irresistible strength, twins or duality, a sheltering enclosure, and finally, a lion of royal conquest. This is not chaos. At minimum, it is suggestive. At maximum, it is a preserved symbolic architecture. The reader must be patient here. The temptation is to demand proof before allowing the argument to unfold, but proof in symbolic matters rarely arrives in a single blow. It accumulates. It is architectural rather than explosive. One stone may be disputed, a wall is harder to ignore. A city, when fully seen, demands explanation. The zodiac must therefore be examined as architecture. Each sign is a chamber. Each image contributes to the larger house. Some rooms may be damaged by later tradition. Some inscriptions may be worn. Some meanings may require careful recovery. But the question is whether the structure itself still stands. If it does, then the implications are considerable. The gospel would not appear as a late invention imposed upon earlier symbols, but as the fulfillment of a pattern already witnessed in creation. The heavens would not replace scripture, nor rival it, nor correct it. They would serve as a prior testimony, subordinate and incomplete, but real. Scripture would become the authoritative interpretation of what creation had long been declaring in figure. This distinction is vital. Creation may declare, but scripture governs. The heavens may testify, but they do not preach with the clarity of the written word. A sign can point, but it cannot save. A symbol can suggest, but it cannot expound the doctrine of atonement, resurrection, justification, or covenant. The gospel in the stars, if it exists, is not a substitute Bible. It is a witness, and a witness must always be judged by the higher court of revelation. Yet, a witness should not be silenced merely because criminals have imitated its voice. The zodiac then stands before us not as a toy of astrology, but as a disputed inheritance. The question is not whether modern superstition has corrupted it. That is plain enough. The question is whether there was something older beneath the corruption, something ordered enough to have been remembered, useful enough to have been stolen, and coherent enough to have been recovered. The next stage is to begin reading the sequence itself, not recklessly, not credulously, and not as though every ancient association must be accepted at face value. We proceed instead by asking whether the first sign establishes a beginning worthy of the pattern that follows. And the first sign is not a warrior, not a king, not a beast of judgment, but a woman.